Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the weekend of November the 9th and 10th, 2024. Now, of course, what I'm going to be doing in this video is I'm going to be looking at the astrology and the I Ching for this weekend. But I'm also going to have a topic, and I'm afraid my topic is going to continue on the theme of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, but I want to review some of the methods that I used to sort of forecast that Trump was going to win. And I've looked at a number of methods in my last video, but in this video I want to focus on one particular approach to astrology, and that is Horary. Now, this is when you ask a question. So rather than looking at any horoscopes of people or events, you look at the horoscope of a question. So you ask a question and you set up a chart for the moment you ask this question. And if someone asks you the question, then you take the chart for the moment you understand the question. So if someone in Europe asked me a question here in Washington State, I would take my time where I am, not the time where the person asking me the question is, because I'm the astrologer, I am the querent. No, I'm not the querent. The querent is the person asking me the question. But if someone asks me the question, then I will take the time where I am and the place where I am. And I think this can be used with political questions, and I think it can be used very effectively. In 2020, I was absolutely 100% sure that Biden was going to win. And I didn't look at his horoscope, I didn't look at any charts for the presidential election, for when the presidential election happened. I just looked at the Horary chart. I asked a question, I think in the early summer, I think in May of 2020, about whether Trump's going to win, and the chart said no. And it was so clear, I didn't have to worry about anything else. Now, as far as this election is concerned, I just wasn't getting clear answers until the very end. I got some clear answers in October. Finally, the Horary astrology came through and gave me actually two very clear answers, two very clear answers to two very clear questions, I think. And those are what I want to be looking at in this video. And I want to look at the whole situation with Horary, and I also want to look at the tradition in terms of Horary and how you're supposed to approach questions when you're asked how another person is faring, what has happened to another person, what is going to happen to another person. But anyway, I'll look at that at the end of this video. And what I want to do now is look at the astrology and the I Ching for this weekend, the weekend of November the 9th and 10th, 2024. As usual, if you enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. And if you enjoy the video and you're not subscribed, I would be super grateful if you were to subscribe. Apparently it makes a big difference to the channel. I've just hit 7,500 subscribers, which is, I suppose, a little bit of a milestone. And I suppose now we're focusing on 10,000 subscribers. So I suppose every subscriber helps. And if you have subscribed, I really am very grateful. So anyway, let's look at the positions of the planets over the weekend. So, top right, I've just put Kamala and Donald, and I put a clock there to illustrate the fact that it is Horary astrology, that the time you ask a question really does matter, or it can matter. So as far as this weekend is concerned, what we have here is we have a chart for midnight, halfway through the weekend, midnight, November the 10th, 2024. And so set for New York, you can see that the moon is at 0 degrees Pisces. So If you are in the Americas, it's very easy. You can say, well, Saturday the moon is in Aquarius, and Sunday the moon is in Sunday the moon is in Pisces. Well, to be precise about that, the moon moves into Pisces on Sunday at 4 in the morning London time. So that would mean that actually the moon if you're in the east coast of the Americas, the moon would move into Pisces at 11 p.m. on Saturday. If you were in the west coast, California, Oregon, British Columbia, then the moon would move into Pisces at 8 in the evening. So still we get the picture that Saturday pretty much is a moon in Aquarius day. Sunday pretty much is a moon in Pisces day. Now, as far as what's going on, we've got on Saturday the moon is trine Uranus. So the moon in Saturday, moon moving through late Aquarius is making so moon is square Uranus, but moon is trine Jupiter. Yeah, moving through late Aquarius, the moon makes a trine to Jupiter, and that's a nice aspect. It's a fortunate aspect. Okay, it's not a dramatic aspect, but it is quite positive. Allows us to be positive. Perhaps allows us to enjoy ourselves, enjoy the company of other people. So Saturday can be a fun day. Also, the moon is making a square to Uranus on Saturday, so that moon square Uranus may stir things up a little. It may create a certain amount of tension and stubbornness, because you've got moon in Aquarius, which is a fixed sign. Jupiter, Uranus is in Taurus. Taurus is a fixed sign, so these two fixed signs, Aquarius plays Taurus. People may be unwilling to compromise. That's always possible with moon square Uranus, and people might be holding on to things and holding on to their ideas very tightly, and perhaps they won't be prepared to compromise. And also on Saturday we have Venus square Neptune. Well, really that Venus square Neptune kind of affects the whole weekend. So I think we can say, Venus, what have we got? Venus at 28, 29, Sagittarius, square Neptune. Well, in fact, the actual square happens when Venus is at 27 Sagittarius. So it's more of a Saturday thing, Venus square Neptune, but I do think it will affect the whole weekend. So Venus square Neptune, on the plus side, Venus square Neptune can be very imaginative, it can be very creative, it can be very artistic. We can have all sorts of ideas, and in terms of making things, we can make them beautiful, and aesthetically we can have interesting ideas, and there can be a sense of colour and how colours come together. But Venus is also about relationships and other people, and so with Venus square Neptune there can be a little bit of confusion. Things can be cloudy, things can be obscured, and we might not quite know what's going on. So if we're with other people, particularly if we're close to other people, we have to be a little bit careful, because we might not quite know what's going on, and the boundaries may become, quite porous, shall we say, with that Venus square Neptune. Also on Saturday we've got a Sun quintile Pluto. So that means that the Sun is going to be 72 degrees from Pluto. And 72 degrees, that is 1/5 of the circle. And the usual cake analogy, that's a slice. If you take a cake, that's 1/5 of the cake, and Sun quintile Pluto is about how we assert ourselves, how we assert our power, and it's perhaps having an idea about how we want to assert ourselves, an idea about how we want to be powerful, and actually making that idea happen, making it happen in the real world. And so perhaps that is the challenge. with these quintiles, it all starts with an idea. It starts with something going on in our mind, and then the challenge then is to turn something that is kind of mental within ourselves and just make it real. And it's all about constructing something. Then we move to Sunday. I would have said overall Sunday is, probably less going on. We have moon sextile Venus. So just as the moon is about to change signs from Aquarius to Pisces, we get a sextile to Venus, and so that sextile to Venus is going to be quite nice, quite sociable. I think that if you're going to a party on Saturday night, you might feel that moon sextile Venus, particularly I think in Europe and the Americas, you should feel it. It's pleasant. It's not wonderfully emotional, but it's it's sociable. It's interactive. It can be something quite enjoyable. And then moon moves into Pisces, and the moon having moved into Pisces, it makes a square. It starts making a square to Mercury. I mean, it's possible moon square Mercury may represent a misunderstanding, perhaps a mismatch. We're trying to communicate in one way, but then we try to find another way. How do we communicate? We may not be able to quite get our message across in the way we would like. Now, as far as fixed stars are concerned, Mercury is conjunct Antares. So Antares is quite a troublesome star. It can be about conflict. I mean, talking about Mercury, my computer is making a lot of noise. I mean, I do need to get a new computer. That is my next priority. I will be getting a new computer, don't worry. But it is very temperamental. And this fan, I'm sure it's not overheating. But it thinks it's overheating. Hence, the fan just won't shut up. Sorry about that. So, Antares is, according to Ptolemy, it's quite a difficult star. In fact, according to Ptolemy, it's of the nature of Mars and Jupiter. So, on the surface, that sounds quite good, but what you got Mars. I mean, Mars Jupiter is not necessarily good because it sounds good because it's Jupiter, but Mars Jupiter is about perhaps putting too much emphasis, too much energy into something, getting too worked up about it. And according to Robson in his The Fixed Stars and Constellations in Astrology by Vivian E. Robson, he says Antares causes malevolence, destructiveness, liberality, broad-mindedness, evil presages, and danger of fatality, and makes its natives rash, ravenous, headstrong, and destructive to themselves by their own obstinacy. So that gives you a general picture. And as far as what it means when it's conjunct Mercury, so Robson says, suspicious, wrongfully accuses friends, unpopular, uses ecclesiastical influence in business, money obtained slowly and with much difficulty, danger of sickness to the native and his family, and death of a relative at home or away. Don't get too worried about that. I mean, Mercury is going to be on Antares at least once a year. It's not a particularly unusual event. So as far as a death is concerned, don't worry about that. But it's kind of giving the impression that Mercury conjunct Antares is a rather difficult influence, and it's Mercury, it's the mind, and perhaps our mind might be going in directions we don't want it to go, and we might have thoughts about other people which are not always going to be particularly pleasant, and maybe we're going to be overly suspicious. I mean, that is certainly possible. Now, as far as what the chart looks like from the perspective of Sydney, Australia, just quickly, this Sydney as a representative of Australasia and Far East of Asia. So the moon at noon is, at midnight, halfway through the weekend, is at 21 Aquarius. So this does mean that if you are in Australasia, then the weekend is going to be more about moon in Aquarius rather than the moon in Pisces. So that aspect, moon trine Jupiter, is indeed that moon sextile Venus. So they're quite easy aspects. So I think in general, the weekend is probably going to be easier if you're in Australia and New Zealand than if you're in Europe and America, particularly America. Things which are in Australasia with that moon trine Jupiter, moon sextile Venus, I mean, things will run smoothly, and I think that it's perhaps going to be a luckier and less complicated day. I mean, that is a possibility. So, as far as the heliocentric picture is concerned, there is not a great deal happening heliocentrically, and there are just really two aspects of note, two fairly minor aspects. We've got, you see, Venus is semi-sextile Neptune, and so what that means is heliocentrically we've got Venus semi-sextile Neptune. Venus and Neptune are 30 degrees apart. Geocentrically we've got Venus square Neptune. So that just emphasizes what I said about Venus-Neptune. It is about, on the plus side, it is about imagination, about creativity. It's about perhaps the use of colour, and perhaps it has a certain otherworldly feel to it, but it can be confused, especially in relationships, and there can be a sort of a fog where we don't understand what's going on, and it may be easy for people to deceive us. I suppose by the same token it might be easy for us to deceive them, but deception is not a road we want to go down. Also, we have Mars semi-sextile Uranus. So there's Mars and there's Uranus. Now that semi-sextile to Uranus is not actually exact over the weekend. You might feel it sort of Sunday night into Monday, but perhaps we're starting to feel it a bit. So Mars semi-sextile Uranus might be perhaps a little bit angry and a little bit willful, and I suppose we have to be slightly careful how we go, but I'm not convinced that we're really going to be feeling that Mars semi-sextile Uranus to any great extent. Oh, one other aspect, Earth sextile Saturn. There's the Earth and that's sextile Saturn. Yeah, actually quite a nice aspect, Earth sextile Saturn. It allows us to stabilize things. It allows us to create foundations, and it allows us to sort of keep our cool. And I suppose, in the Americas, in the aftermath of the election, there have been all these sort of dire warnings about civil war and civil discontent. I mean, it's nice that the first weekend after the election there is this Earth sextile Saturn. It does sort of calm things down. And I mean, I know people might be demonstrating over the weekend, but it's nice to have that aspect. And you'll notice that in terms of the aspects after the election, astrologically, there hasn't been a great deal going on, and maybe that's a good thing. Of course, next week things change. At the end of next week we do have, I think, a full moon. That's something I'll be looking at very soon. So there's the heliocentric picture, and now I want to look at the weekend from the perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of November the 9th and 10th, 2024. Aries. Aries, at the beginning of the weekend, you may feel that you're feeling quite good. You're feeling that things are happening, and I think that you're sort of very much able to enjoy other people's company. And so on Saturday, I think you can afford to have, quite a busy schedule. I mean, busy not in the sense of serious obligation. I think that it's just about, you doing what you feel you want to do. And I think in most cases, other people are going to be fairly obliging. And, Aries, there are maybe things you want to sort of get out into the open. There might be plans to consider, ideas to talk about, and I think that you should find that other people are on good form, and also you may feel that it is a time when you can assert yourself, but I think it's all in a very sort of gentle way. I don't think you need to really push yourself. So Saturday does look pretty good. I mean, I'm not saying you're going to be completely crazy. I think that Aries, you will have a certain sense of right and wrong. I mean, every Aries does have a sense of right and wrong. It's their own sense of right and wrong. It's not a sense of right and wrong that they've picked up from someone else. It's their own sense of right and wrong, and that is something that you are going to be able to express over the whole weekend, both Saturday and Sunday. And in certain situations, I suppose you can be a little bit judgmental, but that's only if you see that someone is behaving in an unreasonable way. You are able to intervene and tell someone what they should be doing. And it's true, Aries. You're going to have a moral compass, and at the same time, you'll be very quick to see if something is going badly wrong. If someone is doing something which is immoral, which is just absolutely not right, you are going to pick them up on it, I think, very, very quickly. Now, that should not take away from the fact that Saturday looks fun. I mean, Saturday you can enjoy yourself, you can be with people, you can express yourself. It looks good. Sunday, well, okay, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, it's quite likely that Sunday is going to be a continuation of Saturday. But if you're in the Americas, in Europe, Africa, then I think Sunday there is a change, and I think things do slow down. And the reason for this is that the moon is moving into Pisces, and as the moon moves into Pisces, you find that there's not so much you want to do, and you may feel that you don't have as much energy as you usually do, and that you're not quite as sociable as you have been of late. And as a result, you might want to slow things down. You might want to scale back on your social life. Just only be with people that you really need to have around. Now, at the end of a weekend, Aries, there could be a little bit of tension, and there are two reasons for that. Firstly, we've got Moon square Mercury. So Moon square Mercury potentially creates the possibility of verbal aggravation. Maybe there's an argument about maybe it's about ideas. You have one idea, another person has another idea. So that's perhaps another reason why you should perhaps keep a low profile and not interact with people unless it's really necessary. Also, Mars is making a heliocentric semisextile to Uranus, on Sunday, Monday. And that might make you feel a little bit stressed out, a little bit accident prone, because you're stressed out. Not seriously stressed out, but you just feel that something's not quite right with that Mars semisextile Uranus. And it's not necessarily about what's going on in your own immediate environment. It's just something you're picking up. It's going on, in the solar system. It's something collective, and you're picking up on this energy. And so don't overreact to it with that Mars semisextile Uranus. It should be quite a minor aspect. So perhaps late on Sunday you need to perhaps make a special effort to relax. Taurus. Taurus, the moon is moving from Aquarius to Pisces, and certainly Saturday is going to be more about the moon in Aquarius. In fact, if you're in Australia and New Zealand, then really the whole weekend is arguably going to be about the moon in Aquarius. And so with the moon in Aquarius on Saturday, and perhaps even longer if you're in Australasia, there is going to be a sense, Taurus, in which you are thinking about, what you want to do, what you want to achieve. I mean, I know it's the weekend, but that doesn't mean that everything has to stop. And I think, Taurus, you're not going to want things to stop. I think that you're going to be quite ambitious. And if there's anything perhaps hanging over from a week, so maybe something wasn't finished over last week, and you feel that over the weekend, or at least on Saturday, you need to sort it out, and your ability in terms of finance, business, if this is relevant to you, finance, business, money, with Moon trine Jupiter, is going to be pretty good. I think you'll have a clear sense of what you'd like to do. I think that you're going to perhaps be luckier than usual. And so if you're working over the weekend, especially on Saturday, I do think that you can actually get a lot done. Even if you're not working, I think that you can have a high profile, you can attract attention, and I do think that people are going to sort of listen to what you say. Then Sunday, the moon changes sign. It moves from Aquarius into Pisces, and there is perhaps a change of emphasis. I think that things maybe become a little more relaxed, and you can perhaps focus sort of more on other people and what other people want, and you'll be able to listen to other people and get some feedback from other people, and that might matter. And so it may be that late on Saturday, perhaps as the moon moves from Aquarius into Pisces, well, certainly if you're in the Americas, it might be a good idea for socializing, for perhaps going to parties, maybe that's a possibility. And then Sunday, things are in general, I think, more relaxed. Now, there is a square this weekend between Venus and Neptune. In fact, there's a semi-sextile between Venus and Neptune from a heliocentric view. And so with that Venus square Neptune, you may have to be a little cautious with it, because Venus square Neptune, Venus is your ruler. If it's square Neptune, it is possible that you get the wrong ideas about certain things. You think you understand something, but you don't, and it may be that the things people say will, at some level, sort of confuse you. And close relationships could be an area where you have to be especially careful, because signals might get mixed. You might think you know what someone wants, but you don't know. And at the same time, other people might make assumptions about you. And so, with relationships, be careful. Also, I suppose with Venus square Neptune, there's some danger of deception. Someone not being entirely honest or truthful, not necessarily deliberately. It's just the way they come over. They somehow find it just difficult to fundamentally express who they are and what they want. And then, so I suppose in that case, there is the possibility of some kind of misunderstanding, or I suppose even embarrassment. But if you want to use Venus square Neptune in the best possible way, then Taurus, be creative. Your imagination is on great form, and you've got these images running through your mind, which are really nice, which are really powerful, and perhaps if you have any artistic abilities or artistic inclinations, it may be that you can get these ideas down on paper, on canvas, or I don't know, you can sing a song, whatever you feel you need to do. But there is a way to get your thoughts and imaginings and perhaps fantasies out into the open in a constructive way. Gemini, Mercury is conjunct the fixed star Antares, and I don't want to dwell on it too much, but Antares can be a little bit of a problem. I mean, when I looked at Vivian Robeson's description of Antares, he talked about perhaps being suspicious and maybe taking things too far. If Ptolemy is right and Mercury is of the nature of Mars and Jupiter, then Mercury, you may be tempted to take things too far, and you may be tempted to take things too far in terms of other people and what you think about other people and what you say about other people, because apparently Mercury conjunct Antares can give us a suspicious nature. So what kind of thoughts are you having about people? Are you having reasonable thoughts, or are you doubting people's motives? Now, sometimes it's actually absolutely right to be suspicious, so there might be a constructive side to Mercury conjunct Antares. On the other hand, I don't want to make you suspicious just for the sake of it. So, do try to get a bit of proportion in with Mercury conjunct Antares, and don't do anything violent or dramatic. Remembering what I said about Mercury being of the nature of Mars and Jupiter. Now, in terms of the moon, on Saturday we've got the moon moving through Aquarius. Okay, this moon moves into Aquarius through until Sunday if you're in Australia and New Zealand and Eastern Asia, well into Sunday, that is. I mean, perhaps the moon is in Aquarius all weekend, effectively, pretty much all weekend if you're in Australasia, especially New Zealand. But in general, certainly the beginning of a weekend of a moon in Aquarius, I think it is easier than Sunday. It's more relaxing. The moon in Aquarius does make a trine to Jupiter, and Jupiter, remember, is in Gemini, and the moon in Aquarius trine Jupiter is it's quite easy. Things are running quite smoothly, and I think in general that you're going to be relatively fortunate, and I think it's going to pay to be open-minded. You are open-minded, you consider many different possibilities, and that way you bring yourself a certain amount of luck. And I think you're going to be relatively lucky on Saturday. And additionally, the moon as it's just before it changes from Aquarius to Pisces, the moon does make a sextile to Venus, and so in terms of relationships, provided you're not too suspicious with Mercury conjunct Antares, I do think that relationships should work quite well, and the moon in Aquarius can allow you to perhaps have a vision about what is possible, and I think other people are going to like this vision, and you're going to come over as an imaginative, forward-thinking kind of person, and so relationships certainly can prosper. Then on Sunday, the moon starts to change sign and moves from Aquarius to Pisces, and with the moon moving into Pisces, it may just feel that the new week is starting. You're moving on. You're starting to take life more seriously with the moon moving through Pisces. You're starting to think about next week, what you need to do next week. Your ambitions might start to kick in. And also, you may start to think about what's holding you up. And, at the end of a weekend, the moon does make a square to Mercury. And there may be something that bothers you. It may be work related. It may be something just about your ambitions and who's holding you up. You may feel that someone's holding you up. And, that Mercury conjunct Antares may kick in. You may have suspicions about a person or an organization who you feel they don't wish you well. And they are trying to stop you in your tracks. So the question is, are your suspicions reasonable? I suspect they're probably not. I think in most cases, I think that you're just perhaps overthinking about what might be holding you back, and I think you perhaps have to perhaps be honest with yourself. But I don't want to give the impression that you're deluded or you're being paranoid, because that's not true. And I think that with the moon moving into Pisces, as Sunday turns into Monday, I think that you can focus on what's important to you, and if you're realistic and level-headed, I think that you're going to be entering into sort of quite a useful state of mind. Cancer, I think it's very much a weekend of two halves. So at the beginning of a weekend, we have the moon in Aquarius, and then the moon moves into Pisces. And so on Saturday, with the moon moving through Aquarius, I think that you're probably going to be fairly self-contained, and I think that you're going to be happily self-contained. You're going to feel that you can pretty much do what you want. The moon is making a trine to Jupiter, and it's making a sextile to Venus. Jupiter and Venus, they are the benefics, and they're fortunate planets, and so you feel that you can harness this good fortune, but in your own way. I don't think you need anyone's help. So I think that Saturday, really just have a quiet day, do what you feel is important to you, and there's absolutely no need to sort of feel pressurized. And it does seem that there's something that you can do probably largely on your own, which can actually turn out very well. It can be very fortunate. Perhaps you're thinking about something or working on something in a sort of a gentle, low-profile kind of way, and you perhaps make a discovery, or you're ready to sort of go deeper into something. Cancer is a cautious sign. You don't like to take risks, and sometimes you don't want to go too deeply into something because you're aware, you're worried about what you might find out. And so maybe on Saturday you can go into something in quite a lot of detail, perhaps more detail than usual. You're a bit concerned about what you might find, and then you might actually find something that is really quite uplifting. And I mean, in a way, Cancer, you will have the magic touch. You will be, I think you will be luckier than average, but it may well be that the foundation of your luck is your own autonomy, being in control. If you find yourself, surrounded by other people, having to deal with other people's problems, whatever, then your luck might dissipate. So I think it's very important that you put yourself first. Now, as the weekend progresses, the moon does change sign, and the moon changes sign from Aquarius to Pisces. The moon moving into Pisces is not a particular problem. I mean, the moon is moving into a water sign. Pisces is a water sign, and Cancer has a real sympathy with the sign Pisces, and so with the moon in Pisces, this can in its own way be quite uplifting. And rather than looking down, you look up and you can see what is available, and there is a certain amount of sort of positivity there. But you're also aware. You're aware of what you'd like to do. You're aware of where you'd like to be, where you'd like to go, and I think you're quite ambitious and forward-thinking in terms of where you want to go and where you'd like to be. But at the same time, you are also you are aware of what might be holding you back, and something is bothering you as the weekend progresses. As you move through Sunday, there's something just getting in your way, and what I think is getting in your way is, it might be your own thoughts. It may be something that you're actually overthinking. You're thinking about it just too much, and those thoughts are not being constructive. Or it may be that you're finding that you're having to spend too much time with another person. I've said it's a weekend, particularly Saturday, for being very self-sufficient, but it may just be as the weekend progresses that someone is irritating you. And I think Cancer, it's just about perhaps dealing with this irritation sort of directly and saying what you have to say, giving your opinion, and then just moving on, because you don't want to get caught up in things which at the end of the day are absolutely trivial, because the moon in Pisces is encouraging you to reach for something else, so sort of reach for something that is beyond your immediate reality, and it may have a sort of quite a spiritual and inspirational nature. But overall, I do think that Saturday is going to be a more constructive day than Sunday, but Sunday is going to have its own opportunities, and those opportunities should be about you going beyond your immediate boundaries and finding out something else. See what you can discover on Sunday. Something is there to be discovered, and hopefully you can find what I'm talking about. I mean, I of course don't know what that is, what's important for you to discover. That's for you to work it out. But there is something, Cancer, on Sunday that I think can be discovered, or at least you can start the process of discovery. Leo, you may find this weekend that things are a little bit slow. I mean, you'd like them to be fast, and you might have big ideas, but when you actually try to assert yourself, when you really, really try to make things happen, you may just find that you are just slowed down. It just inevitably seems to happen, and you might have to go over old ground again and again and again, and this might be irritating. So the question is, what is going on? I think at some level, Leo, you are actually resistant to change. It's almost like consciously you want change, but unconsciously you don't. Unconsciously you would prefer to stay where you are. And so you need to accept that. And if you really would prefer to stay where you are, then just be conscious of it. Look at the advantages perhaps maybe just staying in one place. Perhaps you feel that there are things out there which are troubling. You don't fully understand. You perhaps don't really want to understand. So do get into that backdrop, get a feel for that backdrop. And I think that there is a voluntary nature to this. If you want to move on, if you want to make progress, I think you can. But I just think that fundamentally there might be a resistance to change. Now, as far as the specific differences between Saturday and Sunday are concerned, on Saturday, the moon is moving through late Aquarius, and with the moon moving through late Aquarius, the emphasis could be on other people, and in spite of your misgivings, the moon is making a trine to Jupiter, and it is making a sextile to Venus, and so if you really make the effort, if you make a special effort, I think, Leo, that you can make a good impression. I think you can get people to like you. And I think, in fact, you can also benefit from other people. People are there to help. People, have, got things to offer, and they've got advice to offer. They've got their company to offer as well. So I think people can be of benefit, provided you let them. And I just think that there's some possibility that you're going to be not just resistant to change, but resistant to other people's influence. And so it's just possible, Leo, that you just don't give other people a chance. And that becomes more of the case when the moon changes sign. When the moon changes sign, it goes from Aquarius to Pisces. And so with the moon moving from Aquarius to Pisces, you may find that you become somewhat more intense. I mean, you were already fairly intense in your own way on Saturday, but I think on Sunday it just becomes more so. And you're able to, I suppose, tune into your emotions, but Leo is not a naturally emotional sign, and so when Leos get too emotional, things maybe don't work out. So don't exaggerate your own emotionality, and try your hardest to be just a little bit extroverted, a little bit. I mean, you don't have to be a full extrovert, but you don't want to go too into yourself, be too focused on yourself and your own private concerns. But as Sunday unfolds, I think that might be the case, and you may find yourself just worrying about things, things that may not be especially useful, but still they just concern you, and that might sort of spoil the day a little bit. So that is a possibility, but as I said earlier, today you do have a choice. I think there is a possibility that Leos are quite negative, and they kind of say to themselves, well, what is the point? Is there really any point? If you do something, you just have to do it again. But you can afford to be more positive, especially on Saturday. Saturday the moon does trine Jupiter, the moon does sextile Venus, and I think that the right people can make all the difference. Virgo, as I was saying to Gemini, Mercury is conjunct the fixed star Antares, and this conjunction may be a little bit of a problem. I mean, it gives you, in a way, a lot of energy. I mean, if you take sort of what Ptolemy says as this fixed star Antares having the nature of Mars and Jupiter, so yeah, you've got this energy, but the question is, what do you actually do with the energy? And I think that there's a possibility, Virgo, that you take this energy and you just put it in the wrong areas. You put it into stuff that is not helpful, is not constructive, and you may ask questions that actually don't have to be asked. These questions don't really have much of a basis, and it may be, Virgo, that you have a somewhat negative view of the world and a negative view of other people. As we were looking at what Vivian Robson said about Mercury being conjunct Antares, and he talked about this having a certain suspicious nature. So don't be too suspicious, although sometimes it's okay to be suspicious. Sometimes you have to be suspicious. I mean, I suppose you can start being suspicious because you shouldn't trust anyone, but you don't want to continue with those suspicions when there's actually no reason. So be careful how you use your energy today, or over the weekend, because it just might become just too much, you might be putting your energy into yourself and your own concerns, and it may just get really over the top. And in terms of how other people regard you, you could in the end become fairly insufferable. So that is possible. And I suppose, be careful in your own home, because this weekend I think many Virgos are going to want to spend time at home. They're going to want to spend time in places where they feel familiar, and you just put all this energy into one thing, one place, and that's going to make it difficult for you, and you might also make it difficult for the people around you. Now, I'm sorry to be negative, but that's not the only thing happening this weekend. This weekend we do have, on Saturday, we do have the moon making a sextile to Venus and making a trine to Jupiter, and that moon sextile Venus trine to Jupiter may be quite useful. It may allow you to perhaps find the right way to deal with the people in your life. I've already suggested with Mercury conjunct Antares that maybe people could be a problem, and I think that would largely be your fault. But if you can sort of open your heart a little bit with moon trine Jupiter, moon sextile Venus, I think that action will be reciprocated. Perhaps you can give people a little bit of trust. And if you give people a little bit of trust, they'll be able to return that trust, I think. And the moon does change sign. It does this weekend. It moves from Aquarius to Pisces. Quite when it changes sign, well, it depends on where you are. In London, it's at 4 in the in the Americas, that would be Saturday. So in London, it's 4 in on Sunday. Or in the Americas, that would be in the evening on Saturday. In Australia or New Zealand, that would be more sort of later on Sunday. But whenever the moon does move into Pisces, it does put the emphasis on other people. To an extent, I think you're very aware of other people and other people's presence and other people's influence on you. But the question is, how do you respond to that? Now, there is a possibility that you don't respond very well to that, to moon moving into Pisces. You may feel that this just reaffirms your view that just some people are unreliable, especially as the moon, as it moves through Pisces, does start to make a square to Mercury. And that moon square Mercury may indicate a misunderstanding, that you and another person just don't see eye to eye. And so on Sunday, while I think other people are going to become important, and you're going to start to think about what role they have on your life, you have to be careful, because if you talk too much to people, if you try to discuss important things, I think you could very quickly find that things could get difficult. And so perhaps it's just a question, Virgo, that controversial subjects on Sunday should be avoided. Libra, you, I think, benefit from the fact that the moon is making a sextile to Venus, and I think that is likely to happen on Saturday. It does depend on your time zone. Certainly in the Americas, that moon is sextile. The moon is sextile Venus on Saturday. It could be into Sunday if you're somewhere else. In fact, is going to be on. For example, if you're in Australia, it's certainly on Sunday. But still, the moon does have a sextile relationship to Venus, because the moon will be in late Aquarius, Venus will be in late Sagittarius. So with that aspect, I think that it feels comfortable, and it feels that you're able to be yourself, that you're able to, communicate who you are and what you want. And I think overall you can be fairly constructive. And if you're with other people, I think that you can very much benefit. And I think you're going to get appreciation. And I think appreciation does matter for you. I think you need to be told, perhaps, that you're wonderful, that you're going in the right direction, and that can certainly happen on Saturday. And it's not just the fact that the moon is sextile Venus. The moon is also going to be trine Jupiter on Saturday, and sort of moon trine Jupiter on Saturday, you might start to become aware that there are new possibilities, things perhaps that hadn't occurred to you before, and that could be quite uplifting. Yet, as you move into Sunday, you may feel that things are slowing down. You may feel that there are things you need to attend to. It may be that you need to attend to your own well-being. I mean, Librans always need to look after themselves. Sometimes Librans can be just too focused on other people and other people's demands, and they forget themselves. And with the moon moving from Aquarius into Pisces, you can start to be more focused on yourself and what needs to be done, and making yourself healthier and giving yourself a certain sense of balance. And I think that is important, especially in light of the fact that Venus is making a square to Neptune. Okay, it might be exact on Saturday, but I think it's a feature of the whole weekend. And so with Venus square Neptune, there is some danger that your boundaries start to dissolve. That you need to make a distinction between your life, other people's life. You need to make a distinction between the pressures that are important, the pressures you have to take seriously, and the pressures that really are not your problem. And so Venus square Neptune just may make things a little bit difficult, and it may actually be quite difficult for you to look after yourself. And from a I suppose a psychic point of view, a psychic and emotional point of view, things may come your way which are somewhat undermining. So as you move into Saturday, as you move into Sunday in particular, it's just important that you just keep it simple. Yes, the Venus square Neptune is exact on Saturday, but I have a feeling that you may feel its maximum impact on Sunday. And so make sure that you are properly protected, that it's not just protection from sort of physical things, but from emotional things. I think that's perhaps where it really matters. And I don't think it's a time for being sloppy. It's certainly not a time for drinking. So if you're a drinker, then I would have said this weekend, try to avoid alcohol, and certainly steer clear of recreational drugs. Of course, I'm in Washington State, where marijuana is decriminalized, or is legal, I think. But nonetheless, regardless of the legal environment in which you're in, I think that drugs and alcohol should be avoided, and you should steer clear from them, because you want to be as clear-minded as possible. That really is important. And another thing to say, Libra, is that things can happen, and you can actually see this in the chart. So if you look at this chart, there's Venus, and you will notice that that Venus is on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. I mean, you can see this by eye. If Mars is at 1 degree, 2 degree Leo, and Uranus is at 25 degrees Taurus, the midpoint of Mars and Uranus is going to be at about 28 Gemini. So you can see Venus is at 28 Sagittarius. So Venus is opposition the Mars-Uranus midpoint. And so with Venus opposition to Mars-Uranus midpoint, that can create some problems for you. It might make you a little bit accident prone. You might do things without thinking, and you think it's okay, but it's not okay. You might sort of stumble into something. So, do be careful. Do be careful if you're driving, or if you're operating machinery. And also, do be careful if you're dealing with difficult people. Venus opposition Mars-Uranus midpoint may represent a big misunderstanding. I mean, it could, in certain situations, represent a big argument. I think it's unlikely. I don't think overall the weekend is about arguments. But I think it's very important that, Libra, you're able to err on the side of caution. And so, sorry to be a little bit negative, to sort of end on that negative note, but I think if you're mindful and you're totally with it, and you sort of really think about what's happening all the time, and you really concentrate, and you don't sort of drift into things that you don't properly understand. If you provided you're careful, provided you're sensible, then I think the weekend should be okay. Scorpio, the weekend starts with the moon in Aquarius, and it ends with the moon in Pisces. And so Scorpio, with the moon in Aquarius, it's probably a time when you feel that you shouldn't be in too much of a hurry. That nothing actually has to be done. You understand yourself, you understand your own limitations, and on a Saturday I think that you're going to be very respectful of your own limitations, and I think that your focus is probably going to be quite narrow, and you're probably going to, if possible, try to be in one place and not be moving around from one place to another. That is a waste of time. And in fact, with the moon making a sextile to Venus and a trine to Jupiter on Saturday, okay, it could be Sunday, depending on your time zone, that does indicate to me that the place where you will be luckiest and also the most competent and the most with it is where you are right now. So I think, Scorpio, it's going to be very important that you resist pressure. There might be offers, opportunities, invitations, but I think certainly for Saturday they should be politely ignored or politely rejected, because I think you're happy where you are, and why change what is working fine? Now, the moon does move from Aquarius into Pisces. It could happen on Saturday evening. It could happen on Sunday afternoon if you're sort of east. If you're in sort of Australia, for example. So we don't know quite know when it happens. It does depend on your time zone. But with the moon moving into Pisces, I think on balance, I think that is a good thing. Moon moving into Pisces, I think it's going to make you more confident and probably less cautious. I think you have been cautious over the last couple of days, and with the moon moving into Pisces, you're becoming more aware of possibilities. But you're not crazy about it. You certainly understand your limitations, but you're also becoming aware of what you can do, and you're perhaps able to expand your limits. You can take on more because you have the confidence to know you can do it. And I think that you will have a great sense of your own capacity, and your capacity is getting larger, and your ability to take on more is increasing. So I think that on Sunday, let's get this right. So it's as you move through the weekend, let me make this clear, I think your capacity is increasing. Your ability to do more stuff is increasing. And as you move into Sunday, this very much is the case. And so that might mean that you can take on more, but whatever you're doing on Sunday, it's just got to be something which you want to do. It's not about doing what other people want to do. It's about doing something that, something that you're good at and that you enjoy doing. Enjoyment does matter as the week, by the time you reach, the end of Sunday, it's enjoyment that matters. If you're doing something you don't enjoy, you're just torturing yourself for the sake of it. You shouldn't be feeling any sense of obligation. Though I should also say, Scorpio, that over the weekend you are in your own way quite authoritative. So that's how you're going to occur to people, as someone who is an authority, and people will defer to your better judgment, because your judgment is good all weekend, Saturday and Sunday, and your ability to quickly evaluate the morality of a situation is going to be good as well. If something is wrong, is not right, you'll be clear about it, and that is a Scorpio thing. Scorpios can be a very moral sign, and if someone is going too far, I think you'll tell them very quickly. And it's not just about morality. It may be more mundane than that. It may be about just the law of the land and what is possible, and your understanding of the legality of things is going to be really good, and you can see through people's actions to look at the long-term consequences of it. And so if you're giving advice, if you happen to be giving advice over the weekend, you're going to be able to give very stern advice, but it's advice which I think in most cases is going to be absolutely spot on. Sagittarius, it's a weekend that I think starts off quite well. I think that Saturday certainly looks like being a good day. I think that you are going to be quite gregarious. You're going to be open. You'll be able to talk about lots of different subjects, and also on Saturday, the moon is making a sextile to Venus. It's making a trine to Jupiter, and so on Saturday you'll be able to communicate freely. I think that people will enjoy your company, and through the power of communication and conversation, you can attract people's attention, and I think that people are going to like you, and they're going to find you interesting. And I suppose it runs through into Sunday to an extent. I mean, there's no doubt at the moment, Sagittarius, that you are clever, and your vision is interesting, and people certainly are interested in what you have to say. And you're also, I think, going to be able to give a good account of yourself. So if you are doing something that is special to you, and you want to explain to people why you're doing what you're doing, it will all make perfect sense. And it's possible in that sense Sagittarius, that you can actually be quite persuasive if you want to be persuasive. And I think that once you've explained your view and you've explained why you take a particular position, I think in many cases people are going to agree with you. Now, the moon does change sign. It changes sign from Aquarius to Pisces over the course of a weekend. So with the moon moving into Pisces, I think this inevitably must slow you down. You may not have quite so much to say. You may feel that you've done whatever you can do, and now you feel there's nothing more you want to do, and you just feel maybe you just want to relax. And on Sunday your home might be quite important to you, and at the same time you won't take kindly to irritations, because on Sunday, particularly late on Sunday, we've got moon square Mercury, and that moon square Mercury could be a little bit difficult. We got Mercury in Sagittarius square the moon in Pisces, so it's like you're looking for some kind of peace and security, but there are things irritating you. Now, that could be people irritating you, but it could be your own mind irritating you. You want to relax on Sunday, but you don't want to relax. Your mind is busy, and it's thinking about lots of different things, or it might be that someone else is busy and is active, and you perhaps find them irritating. That's another possibility. Remember that Mercury is conjunct Antares, this fixed star, which is perhaps rather overactive, and it could be on Sunday that you find that there are people asking difficult questions or talking about stuff that you don't really want to listen to. And that means, Sagittarius, it's a question of, well, how do you negotiate the situation? And you could try to be polite and just go with the flow, but then you're going to be irritated. Or you could give people a piece of your mind, in which case everyone's going to be irritated. So perhaps on Sunday you should somehow try to construct and engineer a situation where you don't have to deal with certain people who could just make your life very difficult. Not in any major way, but just make your life difficult by just annoying you, or by forcing you to think about things you don't want to think about. So Sunday, try to arrange Sunday in such a way that you do have peace and quiet, because I think fundamentally by the end of a weekend, that's going to be what you want. Capricorn, you are charismatic at the moment. I mean, you might not feel charismatic, but I think you definitely are. I think that you are someone that at the moment people are gravitating towards. It's perhaps you've just got a perspective that people want to hear. Or, there may be people that actually think that you're the only person that can solve their problems. I mean, this is a situation that Capricorns can get themselves into. They may not want to take on this central role, but there is perhaps an expectation. I suppose, why is that expectation there? Maybe because you just come over as being a calm and sensible person, and you can get things in perspective. So you might feel a certain sense of responsibility there, and I think that's a good thing, provided it doesn't get out of hand. And on Saturday, your advice may be particularly sought after. I think that you really can get things in perspective on Saturday, and things like money and organisation and what to do about particular material problems, and it won't faze you. And so yeah, maybe you can be very helpful. You don't want to overload yourself, and I understand that many Capricorns do feel a sense of responsibility. If someone starts asking for help, you're going to want to keep giving them help. I mean, that's perhaps natural for a Capricorn, and I suppose on a positive note, I mean, that's going to make you feel useful and wanted, and from an existential point of view, that will make you feel that it's all worthwhile, perhaps. Though, you don't want to take things too far, and I suppose you've got to think about yourself. But looking at things from your own point of view, on Saturday the Moon is making a trine to Jupiter. It's a very sensible trine to Jupiter, and so in terms of your own life and your own material issues with that Moon trine Jupiter, I actually think there's a lot you can do to make sure that everything is in order, everything is sorted out, and you can make constructive changes. Then we have the Moon moving into Pisces this weekend. So the Moon moves from Aquarius into Pisces, and I think that with the Moon moving into Pisces, I think it's quite a gentle change. Moon moving into Pisces, I think that there is this continued emphasis on communication of the Moon moving into Pisces, but perhaps not so much has to be said. And I think that you're going to find it easier to sort of understand the sort of subtle nuances of conversation. You don't have to listen to what someone says. If you use your emotions and your feelings, you can actually get an idea about what someone is trying to communicate get an idea about what someone is trying to communicate without them actually having to spell it all out. And also with Moon moving into Pisces, you may feel that it might be nice to go somewhere. I think that from a relaxation perspective, spending a bit of time, weather permitting, close to water for Capricorns could be really good. So you don't have to go a long way. I mean, it depends where you live, but just spending half an hour, by a lake or by a river, or perhaps going to the beach, depends where you live. But it just might help you relax and get things in perspective. There are a few things that you might feel that you have to work through, especially as late on Sunday as the moon is square Mercury. But somehow being close to water is going to make you feel more comfortable and more in tune with your environment. Aquarius, I would think that Saturday is likely to be a better day than Sunday. And the reason for that is that, on Saturday, the Moon is moving through Aquarius. It is moving through your sign, and it's making a trine to Jupiter, and it's making a sextile to Venus. I think that trine to Jupiter is particularly nice. I mean, okay, it may not be exact, that trine to Jupiter, but still, Moon in Aquarius, Jupiter Gemini. There's a natural sympathy between those two signs. And so on Saturday, you can just sort of get up, see what's available, and just go for it. And everything is going to just be relatively calm, but you're going to have a certain amount of luck on your side, and at the same time you're going to come over as being an easygoing, interesting person, and I think that, people are going to enjoy your company, and if you want to do something that's fun, then, go ahead. I don't think there's going to be a problem. And also, you will have a knack on Saturday, in fact, and Sunday as well, of being able to get people to listen to you. and get people to take you seriously. And the reason you can get people to take you seriously and get people to listen to you is because you can return the favor. You take someone else seriously, they'll take you seriously. You listen to someone and they'll listen to you. And so over the weekend, especially on Saturday, I think it is a great time for telling people that you're alive and well, that you're ready to communicate. It's a good time for making connections, and so that is really quite positive, I think. Now, the moon does leave Aquarius. When it leaves Aquarius kind of depends on your time zone. 4 a.m. on Sunday if you're in London. That would be Saturday evening if you're in the Americas, or it would be, I suppose, Sunday afternoon if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But with the moon moving into Pisces, I think that probably slows things down a little. There isn't quite so much to do. There isn't quite so much to say, and it's perhaps a time for just taking on board everything that's happened over the last couple of days, feeling it, not just thinking it. Sometimes when you are involved in a particular situation, it leaves an emotional impression, and the emotional impression might not be immediately apparent. It may be days later that you kind of go back to it and you remember that emotional impression. And on the basis of an emotional impression, you can perhaps make a decision. And as you move through Sunday, it's possible that you feel that you're just not quite as sociable as you perhaps used to be at the beginning of the weekend. The moon is making a square to Mercury. In fact, the moon will make a conjunction to Saturn at some stage. I think that conjunction to Saturn is going to be pretty late on Sunday or into Monday, but it's coming up, and so that might be that socially you want to start to sort of close things down, and perhaps you want to reflect. And it's important that you don't let your ideas run away with you. Remembering Mercury is moving to a square of Saturn, there are things that you might just be starting to worry about, and it may be about over reflection. Don't reflect too much, and I think that by the end of the weekend you should just try to be calm and just perhaps focus on the feelings rather than the thoughts, and in that way you can maintain your calm. Pisces, the weekend starts with the moon in Aquarius. So Aquarius is the sign immediately before Pisces, and so with the moon in Aquarius, you may feel that there are some things that you perhaps want to keep to yourself. I mean, I think you've had this for the last couple of days, Friday as well, and Saturday. There are some things that, are important to you, but there's nothing that needs to be actually talked about. And, because the moon, when it's moving through Aquarius, it does actually make a trine to Jupiter. And Jupiter is, of course, your ruler. And with that moon trine Jupiter, that gives you confidence. But it gives you a quiet confidence. It's not the kind of confidence that needs to be discussed. You don't need to shout about something. If you get any good news or any good ideas on Sunday, you don't need to tell anyone. In fact, if you were to tell people about how good you feel about something, that might be a bad idea, because you might not get a good response. You might get a zero response. It might be like you're shouting at a brick wall, or I suppose you might get a negative response. So, why spoil things? particularly at the beginning of something, when you're starting to feel that things are working, that things are going your way. To talk about them too early, I think, would be a bad idea. And so on Saturday, you're lucky, but you're lucky in your own way. And it may be a luck that shouldn't be shared. So that means there may be good grounds for keeping yourself to yourself, or I suppose family are different. It may be that there are members of your family who you really trust, who you can be open with, and they'll understand what you're trying to say. Although you always have to be careful with the family, because the family can be a group of people that sort of appreciate you the least. Doesn't the Bible say that the prophet is never recognized in their own village, because the village are just too familiar with you? They know you, they know who you are, they know your background, and that means that you're not particularly special. So maybe you should just keep things to yourself, and even if you're thinking you're quite clever, it's probably not a good idea to show off your cleverness, even to people that love and respect you. They might just not give you the appreciation you deserve. Anyway, the moon moves out of Aquarius and moves into Pisces on sometime on Saturday or Sunday, and I think with the moon moving into Pisces, that's, in one sense, it's quite nice having a moon in Pisces. It means that you feel at the center of things, and you feel that sort of emotionally more balanced, and that your emotions are in accord with the world in which you're living. Though the moon does make a square to Mercury. Now that square between moon in Pisces and Mercury in Sagittarius, it happens really right at the end of the weekend. And on the surface it sounds quite difficult, moon square Mercury. It may feel that there's some sort of mismatch, that there's something you're trying to communicate and you can't communicate. There's something you're trying to think about, but perhaps your feelings get in the way. But I actually think this moon square Mercury could actually be quite constructive, because it forces you to think, and it forces you to confront the way you think with the way you feel. And I understand, Pisces, that you are an emotional person. Pisces, you are a water sign, but you have an intellect. You've probably got a very fine intellect. Wasn't Einstein a Pisces? And so with that moon square Mercury, you can confront yourself. Feelings and thoughts can confront each other, but in a very positive way. And you can start to make sense of your feelings and your intuitions. And this may actually go back to what's been happening over the previous week. It suddenly becomes clear what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. And in fact, by the end of the weekend, there may be a sudden sense of purpose. A sense of purpose which is not easily arrived at. It may feel that you really had to struggle to find that sense of purpose, but in the end, it all makes sense. And that does mean that, as you move into Monday, as you move into the week, as the weekend comes to a halt, you start to have a sense of what you need to do. And I think that, as you move into Monday, the beginning of a week, I think you're going to have a clear idea about what you want to do. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to look at the weekend from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is the weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 37, the family. And this hexagram doesn't move, no moving lines. And so it may be that this hexagram is simply stating the obvious. It's the weekend. Most people don't work over the weekend, or many people don't work over the weekend. Weekends are obviously a time where people spend more time with their family. And so that may just be it. All there is to say. It's a weekend, you're going to spend time with your family. And end of. That's all there is to say. But I suppose we can sort of unpack this hexagram and say, what is it about? And this is the I Ching. It is a Confucian oracle, and because it's a Confucian oracle, it has quite a traditional view. The family is a hierarchical structure. It's a model for the way the state should be run from a Confucian perspective. And so there should be order in the family. People should know their positions and not try to usurp their positions. And so people have their roles. And of course, if you look at the I Ching, the translations of the I Ching, of course, it's all that. It talks about the woman's places in the home, and the woman needs to do her job, and she needs to look up to the father, the husband. But that's the I Ching. I don't think that completely. I'm not going to push that in a modern context. It's just more about people knowing their roles, and there is a thing. Everyone has got a role to play in the family, and they shouldn't be trying to usurp those roles. And by having a sort of a fairly traditional approach. Now, I'm not talking about gender roles here, because I don't think that's appropriate. But still, the family needs to be respected, and that is the foundation of a happy and successful weekend. And when we talk about the family, it's not just the family. It can be the clan. It can be whatever group you're involved with. It may not be family, it may be a group of friends, it may be a society you're involved with. Whatever is important this weekend. And we all have our responsibilities within the unit, whatever that unit is. And if we honour those responsibilities, then we should be fine. Now, because it's a locked hexagram, because we don't have any moving lines, it can be useful to look at the nuclear hexagram. And the nuclear hexagram perhaps gives us a sense of the foundations of things, and what is the underlying picture there. And so the reason I'm doing this is because I have got the title wrong. There we go. And the nuclear hexagram, we look at the four lines in the middle, is 64, which is before completion. And that may be giving us some added information about what perhaps is happening within the family, within the group, whatever group you're involved with over the course of the weekend. Of course, it may be that you're on your own this weekend, and you have no contact with anyone. So, the I Ching is not always going to be appropriate to everyone's situation who is watching this. But before completion may indicate that as a unit, there is still something that's being worked on. Something is not as it should be. So, for example, there may be work to be done, for example, in the household that is not being done, and it's still rather up in the air. And this may actually be a time where family cohesion is actually very important, that everyone has to perform their role almost to perfection. And we don't want anyone making mistakes, because before completion actually gives us the image of crossing a river, a great expanse of water, and it's a really difficult task, and things can go wrong as we try to cross the river, and we need to get to the far bank. And so perhaps in terms of the family, the family unit, and where the family unit is moving, where where the household is moving, perhaps, or where the group is moving. In terms of all of that, there is something unresolved, something is still up in the air, and it's just going to be very important that everyone does fulfill their role and understands their responsibility, and we don't have any egos, people saying, I want to do this. No, it's all about the family as a unity, and everyone needs to understand their responsibilities, and of course everyone has to show respect. Of course, this is a Confucian oracle, and so respect and the importance of hierarchies are emphasized. So, what is your role in the hierarchy? And perhaps that's a role that you need to understand and not complain about. Okay, so now I want to look at horary astrology. So, in terms of the election, but horary astrology is not something I talk about a great deal in these videos. So, horary astrology is when you ask a question. You ask a question and you want to know an answer. So I'll give you an example of a question that I asked some time ago. So let's see. So for example, I'm not going to look at this question right now, but just to give you an example of a question, I asked this question in March 22 of 2016. Will Britain vote for Brexit? So basically that was me. I looked at the question where I was, and I did this in Washington State. So I asked this, is Britain going to vote in favour of Brexit? This was sort of a few months before the referendum. And I asked that question. So the theory is that somehow that question gives the answer. And some people might think that's absurd. I mean, at first, when I came across horary astrology, when I first started practicing when I first started doing astrology, it seemed ridiculous. I just could not get into it at all, and I really resisted. I really sort of resisted it, and there are people who think that it is nonsense. I mean, how can it be that me asking a question, a lot of other people are going to be asking questions. A lot of other people are going to be asking the same question about, for example, the result of an election. And they're going to be going all over the place. Well, I suppose you have to deal with the fundamental subjectivity of things. There is a subjectivity there. Plus, maybe some astrologers are better than others. Maybe some astrologers are more in tune with horary as a technique than others. I don't know. These are difficult questions, which, particularly with elections, are really difficult to answer. But I do use horary astrology, and I find that it works very well. Now, in terms of horary astrology, it is actually a very controversial area. There are a lot of arguments in terms of horary, and I've always noticed this. Once I started getting into horary in the sort of late 80s, people had their own views of horary. If I give you, for example, if I tell you how I'm going to look at a chart with horary astrology, I think there are going to be some people who are going to disagree with me. They're going to say, no, you have got it wrong, and that's always been the case with horary. It seems to attract disagreements, and there is this tension here between me as sort of individual practitioner. I do things my way. There's a tension between that and the tradition, and the tradition has become very important with horary astrology. What did, for example, William Lilly, who was an astrologer in the 17th century, how did he practice his horary astrology? He wrote this case book, this thick book, which goes through loads and loads of charts, and some people will regard that as almost canonical. This is a canon of how it should be done. I mean, certainly when I did a course in horary astrology with Olivia Barclay, and I did this sort of in the late 80s, it was very focused on William Lilly. You were expected to know William Lilly backwards. In the course, you had to write an index of William Lilly, and she wrote a book called Horary, Astrology Rediscovered, which she said the whole course is in here. It has an introduction by Robert Hand. And Olivia Berkeley was a major innovator, in the sense that she changed. I mean, she was an innovator. Horary astrology is not about innovation, by the way. I mean, innovator is perhaps the wrong word, but she was very influential. And she died. I think she died in 2001, and she, I think, to a great extent, started the backlash against psychological astrology, because in the 80s it was all psychological astrology. You went to an astrology conferences. I mean, he went to one astrological conference just full of psychological astrology. I think there was actually a time in the 1980s where Chiron attempted to supplant Jupiter as a ruler of Sagittarius. It was getting that crazy with psychological astrology. It was all the rage. Then there was a backlash, and I think that Olivia Berkeley was largely responsible for that backlash in the early 90s. And of course, now we think about Hellenistic astrology and the work of people like Robert Zoller and is that his name? Robert Zoller, I think, and Robert Hand, and we think of the Hellenistic revival. But before the Hellenistic revival, I think you had Olivia Berkeley and her backlash against psychological astrology, and I think certainly in the UK, she was really very, very influential. And so Olivia was a really interesting person. She was a Sagittarius. She was really more interested in animals than people, and I remember her saying that she liked driving. Driving was very important to her, and she was saying how she used to visit a friend of hers, and she always had difficulty parking because there wasn't a parking space. And then she said, "Oh well, but the friend, her husband died," and she said, "Oh well, that was very fortunate because I now had a parking space." And so she was quite callous in that kind of way, but animals were what mattered to her. If you called her about a missing person, she couldn't care less. I mean, not what I ever did, but if you asked her about, she's always said, if you ask her about a human who is suffering, she didn't care. But on the other hand, if it was an animal, if you'd lost your rabbit or your cat or your dog, you could call her at 3 a.m, and she would be straight away sitting at the kitchen table trying to work it out. And so that was the kind of person she was. And so in her book, Horary Astrology Rediscovered, we have example charts of 4 missing animals, but only one missing person. So, the missing person, the only missing person she used was a case in the 1980s that so that's of a 29-year-old woman, Anne Locke, who was abducted and murdered in 1986, and she was asked by a journalist where Anne Locke was, and Olivia, in her book Horary Astrology Discovered, she interpreted the chart. Now, as far as Olivia was concerned, when she interpreted this chart, this is how you find people in the chart. And this is relevant because in the end I'm going to be talking about finding Kamala Harris in a chart. So that's why I'm talking about this chart for Anne Locke. And so she was abducted. She just by trains. If you're in the UK, you might remember this case. It was fairly horrific. There were 2 men who would abduct women and girls, murder them, and so forth. And she was abducted and murdered, and She was abducted on May the 18th, 1986. I think they found her body 9 weeks later. And Olivia was asked the question on May the 30th, 1986, where is Anne Locke? And yeah, Olivia, I'm not convinced that Olivia, in terms of her interpretation of this chart, did it very well. So she took the view that the person asking her, who was a journalist asked her the question. So she decided that the person asking the question was represented by Leo and represented by Sun in Gemini. And her logic, I think, well, Sun in Gemini, that's a journalist. So that was her logic. And therefore she took Anne Locke as a ruler of the seventh. So that would be Saturn. And I'm not convinced about this, by the way. But this was her logic. But she concedes that William Lilly, in his book Christian Astrology, said that if someone, you don't have any relationship to someone, and if someone doesn't have a position, so if they were president, you take them as the 10th house. If they were the Archbishop of Canterbury, you take them as the 9th house. But if they don't have any role, they don't have any position, you don't know them, you take them as the ruler of the 1st house. And this is something that when I was looking at a chart for Kamala Harris, that one of the commentators, Venus Kazemi, raised this issue, and so this is something I will be looking at when I look at my Kamala Harris horary. So, really, I think that Olivia should have taken the Sun as representing Anne Locke, but also this chart, I suppose, is descriptive because you can see that the moon is on the 8th house cusp. In a horary chart, where the moon is, the house where the moon is telling you what the chart is all about. And the 8th house is about death, and that is what it's all about. And you can see that the moon is making a separation. The moon is making a separation, separating from Saturn, and it's moving to a conjunction of the Sun. Now, you might, if you take the Sun as Anne Locke because she's ruler of the ascendant, then the Sun is separating from an opposition of Saturn. So I would, in that case, have taken Saturn as being the person, or perhaps the people, because I think 2 men killed her. And so there's a Sun opposition Saturn. Certainly the chart, I think, is basically saying that she is dead. And so I just sort of introduced that chart to think about the way to think about assigning people. Should you take the 7th house as being Anne Locke, or should you take the 1st house? I think certainly William Lilly said that you should take the 1st house, and I think looking at the chart, that does seem to make more sense. Now, in terms of political charts, here was my Brexit horary. So I asked the question: Will Britain vote to leave the European Union? And as a result of this chart, I was absolutely convinced that Britain would vote to leave the European Union. And it's a long time since I did this chart. I mean, this is sort of, getting on for 9 years ago. And sort of my logic kind of went like this. It said, well, we're about 3 months away from a referendum. Looking at the moon represents the people. It does represent the British people. This is my logic. You may practice horary astrology and you may have a different view, but this is how I looked at this chart. And the moon is in Libra. And, what is the moon's next aspect? Well, the moon's next aspect is a sextile to Saturn. And then it makes an opposition to Uranus. But the moon makes that sextile to Saturn at, Saturn is at 16 degrees 24 Sagittarius. So it makes that sextile to Saturn at 1624 Libra. So the moon has just edged into the Via Combusta. The moon has just edged into the 12th house. And then the moon moves on to make an opposition to Uranus. So I took the view that that opposition to Uranus probably meant leaving the European Union. So moon sextile Saturn perhaps was the vote, but the moon in the Via Combusta, moon in the 12th house, and I think the moon in the 12th house is about the British people perhaps being a bit secretive about how they're voting. And certainly the polls on the eve of the election, on that day, I think it was it June the 23rd, I think, off the top of my head, they thought that people were going to vote to stay, but in fact they voted to leave. And that's a moon in the Via Combusta. When the moon is in the Via Combusta, it is a surprise. And so you can actually see the full logic of it. You have a moon makes the sextile to Saturn, and then it moves on to the opposition of Uranus. So the moon sextile Saturn, that's a vote, and moon opposition Uranus might be Britain leaving. So that was my logic, and I just remember at the time I was absolutely 100% sure that Britain was going to leave the European Union, and I made this clear on my blog. I mean, not that anyone read it, but that was one way in which you can use Horary astrology. Then there was the 2020 election. So I asked the question, is Trump going to win in 2020? Not 2024, 2020. And so let's just look at this chart. Here's the Trump prediction. And so at the time I asked the question, May the 6th, 2020 at 4:40 p.m., Trump was president. Therefore, it's absolutely easy to assign him to the chart because we had Cancer on the midheaven. Cancer on the midheaven, that represents the president. The moon is at 10 degrees Scorpio. The moon is applying to an opposition of the sun. The moon is fallen. It's in the Via Combusta. It's applying to an opposition of the sun. Easy. He's not going to... I knew, on the basis of that horary, that he was going to lose. I did not have to worry about solar returns, solar arc directions, profections, Hindu astrology, all the stuff I had to worry about with Kamala and Trump, because I never got a clean horary until right at the end with Kamala and Trump and this time round. But here I was lucky. I got a clean horary straight away, and it was absolutely obvious that Trump was going to lose. That was it. I had everything I needed, and it was just really simple. That was on May the 6th. After May the 6th, I knew for sure that Trump was going to lose. And of course, indeed, he did lose. Now, as far as the present election, 2024, I tried asking horaries, but I never got anywhere with it. I just never really got an answer that I was satisfied with, until I'd already been through all my charts. I'd already, been through all the solar returns and directions and everything else. And then in October, I just happened to ask the question again. And basically in Horary astrology, you should not ask the question more than once. And I just got questions which I did ask horaries which did seem to suggest to me that Kamala was going to lose, but I was never quite comfortable with them. And again, it's bad practice to ask the same question more than once in a horary. But anyway, I asked this question, and I talked about it in a video. And when I talked about this chart, I said that I took Kamala as being the 7th house, as being Mercury, because she's ruler of the 7th. Now, Venus Kazemi, who regularly comments on my site, pointed out that William Lilly would have said that I should not have taken Kamala to be the seventh, but I should have taken Kamala as being the first. And in a sense, I think he was right. If I really was completely neutral about it, completely neutral, it's just someone I don't have any interest in. But you could also, I suppose you could argue that Kamala Harris was the midheaven because she's vice president. I mean, that is an executive. She's part of the executive. Is that right? Yeah. But still, I did understand Venus Kazimi's point. But the thing is, at the time, it was before the election, I could not be entirely honest, I didn't think, about my own subjectivity. And the thing about the Horary chart is it does have subjectivity. I do have my own opinions. And I think that my opinions are completely relevant in terms of whether I take the ascendant as Kamala or whether I take the seventh house as Kamala. So my opinions on this are as follows. I'm not an American citizen. I cannot vote. If I were to be an American citizen, I certainly would not have voted for Donald Trump for moral reasons. Because I believe, regardless of what people say that RFK is going to do, I believe that he's going to be a disaster for the environment. I'm not into fracking. I'm not into all this drill baby drill stuff. I think he's going to have. It's going to be potentially quite awful if Trump. Well, at the time, I thought it's really awful if Trump were to get in terms of the environment. That's me looking at things from a moral perspective. But I suppose I'm a Gemini, so I can play these games. But then there's the question: who do I want to win? And I couldn't say this before the election, but I'm afraid that from an emotional point of view, I passionately wanted Trump to win. Why? Because I had just predicted that he was going to win. I'd made it very obvious that he was going to win. I mean, but it seemed to me absolutely obvious if he was going to win. If Trump lost, it would be a complete disaster for me. I mean, not only have I made a fool of myself in terms of my videos, but also in terms of my own technique. It would show that all my careful midpoints, dials, it's just garbage. Garbage is a common word, isn't it? And it would have been devastating, really devastating. And because of my ego, maybe I shouldn't be proud of my ego, but I'm sorry, I'm a human being, I'm an imperfect human being. And although I know that Trump is going to be a disaster for the environment, although I would not have voted for him, I mean, I might even have voted for Kamala Harris. I don't know. I think I would have voted for Jill Stein. But even despite all of that, because I'm quite moral about that. I mean, I could not have morally voted for Donald Trump, even though I completely wanted him to win. And I did want him to win. Emotionally, I completely wanted him to win. And it's just my ego. I'm sorry. I'm an imperfect human being. So because of that, I take myself as being the ascendant. And to an extent, I regard the Trump as the ascendant. Kamala is my opponent. I did not emotionally want her to win. In spite of my moral protests, I wanted Trump to win. And I wanted Kamala to lose. Plus the fact, to be honest, I couldn't stand Kamala. I just thought she was, I mean, as many people have said, I thought she was an insult to my intelligence. I mean, other commentators have said that that's my feeling. I really thought she was awful. So that's another reason for me to take Kamala as the seventh house cusp. And I can say all this now because the election's over. I'm certainly no chance of me influencing anyone's vote. And that was another concern. I didn't want to be too subjective before the election because I would hate to think that, who knows, one person votes in Pennsylvania because of something I say and the environment gets destroyed. We couldn't have that. But it's going to get destroyed anyway, but it's not my fault. But so Kamala is the seventh house. Therefore, that's why I took in this chart Kamala as Mercury, and Mercury was in a diabolical position. So my question, by the way, here is: will Kamala become president by the end of January? I think that was my question, and clearly, of January 2025, and so clearly, Mercury is in an absolutely terrible position because Mercury is combust; it's conjunct the Sun. That's the first point. Secondly, Mercury is going to a square of Mars, and Mars is in mutual reception with the Moon. So that Mercury Mars that's it. She gets wiped out. She loses, and that aspect is happening in about 45. It's about a couple of weeks. It's about just over half a degree. And that's kind of fits, okay, it's close, it's coming up. And further, there's Mars, and I take Mars as being a male figure. And I think in this case I took Mars as Donald Trump. Mercury square Mars being destroyed. And Mars is in mutual reception to the Moon in Scorpio. So the Moon in Scorpio represents the American people in the 12th house, not being entirely open about how they're going to vote. And that's perhaps indicating that the polls were wrong. And it's like with that Brexit horary, that the Moon was moving into the 12th. People are not being open about their feelings. So I think that was clear. Now, my final horary is a horary I regret. I was too cautious. And I really regret it. My big regret about the election is not being open about this horary that I cast. I mean, it confirmed that Trump was going to win, but I should have talked about it beforehand because it's too late now. But I asked this question: will Trump win the popular vote? I asked this on October the 21st, 2024. And the answer was yes. So I kind of knew astrologically that he was going to win the popular vote, but I just didn't publicize. Maybe I sort of doubted the chart. I think that can't be possible. It can't. I mean, I knew it was saying he was going to win the popular vote, but I wasn't confident enough to. I was perhaps listening too much to the media, and I just didn't think this was possible. But I saw this, and I just couldn't go all the way and publish this chart before the election, and I should have done. But there's Mercury rising now. Mercury, because I just said emotionally I wanted Trump to win. So in a way, Trump would be Mercury. Mercury also, Trump is me, and the Moon is. Mercury is trine Saturn. Mercury is moving to a trine of Saturn. Saturn is ruler of a midheaven. I mean, the midheaven is the presidency. This is further confirmation that Trump is going to win. So it indicates that Trump's going to win, clearly, even more clearly than the Kamala Harris, from the chart I've just looked at. But this chart wasn't about him winning. I suppose theoretically he could have won the popular vote and lost the Electoral College. But Mercury was going to a trine of Saturn, clear indication of victory. Plus the Moon. The Moon is in Cancer. Moon very well placed in Cancer. I'm using a Regiomontanus house cusps because that's traditional with Horary astrology. It's not Lily. That's what Lily used, not the Placidus house cusp. But the house cusps between Placidus and Regiomontanus are not that different. And so the Moon is in Cancer. It eventually makes the trine to Mercury and the trine to Saturn. And as far as I'm concerned, that horary indicated that he would win the popular vote. And although I didn't ask the question specifically for that horary, it also suggested he was going to win. So in the end, horary astrology clearly showed that Trump was going to win. And it in fact indicated that he was going to win the popular vote. And I'm just sorry that I didn't publish that chart on my YouTube channel before the election, because that was what people were expecting, that Kamala would win the popular vote. But the horary suggested otherwise. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Trump, Kamala, and Horary Astrology. It's the final way of looking at an election, and as we saw with the 2020 election and my horary for which showed that Trump was going to lose, it can be a major shortcut. It can just give you a clear answer, and you just don't have to worry about all the other stuff, the midpoints and perfections and whatever else you want to use. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So, yeah, thanks a lot for watching, and I will talk to you again very soon.